Good to see you, good people. My name is Elvar. I'm coming directly at you from Reykjavik, Iceland, and this is Peeling the Onion. This is episode number 6, and we had the extensive pleasure of sitting down with none other than Mr. Blixa Bargeld, the legendary musician and artist. Now, next April 5th marks the release of the new Einstürzende Neubauten album Rampen Alien Pop Music. And I spoke with Blixa about that, as well as his career, which by now it's extremely prolific and revolutionary. He of course did 20 years with the Bad Seeds. He's done collaborations with Teho Teardo, and just a lot of really, really good work. I could have sat down with him twice as long because he has endless stories and experiences. So I do hope you like it. And without further ado, here's my chat with Mr. Blixa Bargeld.
Got it. Hello, good morning. Just a second.
Yes, sir.
Here I am. You can hear me and you can see me, yeah?
Yes, sir. Awesome. Good to see you, man. Good to see you. So I wanted just to start right off by talking about your upcoming album, Rampen Alien Pop Music, that's to be released, April 5th, next month.
Mm-hmm.
You just released Ist as a single. I can see it's been getting a great feedback online.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first time you built a whole album of what you call Rampen, which is basically a live improvisations. You've been experimenting with these improvisations like since the 80s, and many of your songs started this way, but this is the first time that every song on the album is a Rampen. How did that come about?
No, yeah, it was a very pragmatical decision. When we discussed the possibility of the next album in the tour bus on the 2022 tour, it was clear that Alexander Hacke won't have much time in 2023 to spend on making the album. So we had to come to a practical solution on how to save some time. And that's how the idea was born, to make it a whole album of Rampen.
Okay.
It wasn't planned to make it a double album, but that's how it ended up. You know, we had about 25 different Rampen from the tour, and we decided to record 15 of them for the album.
Right.
That saved us a lot of time because usually when we go to the recording studio, we spend a lot of time researching. We spend a lot of time researching new possibilities, new materials, strategies, things like that. And we make a lot of mistakes. We have a lot of errors. We have a lot of wasted time, etc. But because all these Rampen were played on the tour, on the same equipment, with the same instruments, we could just transport that to the studio and record all of them.
Right. Okay. You had a teleprompter on stage, which you were loading like new set of text fragments every few concerts.
Yeah.
Is that how most of the lyrics were written, or?
On this album, yeah.
Yeah.
I was loading a couple of different fragments. Every couple of shows I would change them to my teleprompter. So once the improvisation unfolded on stage, I would look through them and see if I have anything suitable for what's going on stage, and then I would try that out, and I would start associating, and would start improvising lyrics as well. Sometimes that worked. Sometimes it only worked for a minute or two, and then I changed to something else. Okay. But I left all these things in there, even if they are disparate. Like I left Pestalozzi in there, even so it is just like 3 or 4 lines long. And then I went to something completely different.
Right. All right. On that song, you're mentioning what? Johann Heinrich Pestalozzi, the Swiss social reformer and educator, known as the father of modern education, and also Alexander Sutherland Neal, a Scottish educator and author. What's the connection between these two?
Well, the connection between these two was they were both reform pedagogues. So that's an obvious connection.
Okay.
But the fragment didn't lead me very far. The whole fragment is just I'm sitting in my chair. I'm feeling very Pestalozzi, feeling very A.S. Neil. I was thinking of a picture that I've seen of A.S. Neil at the Summerhill School, where he sits in his big armchair on a big stage, and all around him the chaos unfolds. But he's obviously not getting touched.
Okay.
He's not getting touched. Nobody is doing anything to him, and even there's a lot going on all around him. That was a whole picture, and I liked the picture, and then I sang that, and that's where it stopped basically.
Yeah.
After that, in the studio, when I was starting to hang flesh on these bones and try to make it a body, I actually used my Amazon history and did a long list of ingredients that I have bought on Amazon over the last 25 years.
Okay.
It's like a sack of 10 kilograms dead sea salt. And then the very last one that is there is "and a cellar full of noise."
Right.
So if you can Google any of them, they all exist. They're all existing products.
Okay.
And "A Cellar Full of Noise" is actually Brian Epstein's autobiography.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes. Or the one that John Lennon jokingly said, it should have been called "A Cellar Full of Boys."
Okay. Right.
I mean, it's suited. It all looks like it makes sense, but it is actually just very simply a selection of things that I bought on Amazon over the last 25 years.
Okay.
Don't overlook the humor in Neubauten.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
Yeah.
So this was phase 5 of your supporters
Yes.
project. Now you call it the Rampen phase. It's basically your crowdfunding that you came up with in the early 2000s.
Yeah, 2002.
Did this phase of the supporter project differ from the last one?
Yeah, they were all different. They were all different. This one was obviously very quick. And I can also announce that it was the last one. We've done it now for 5 rounds. And when we started this in 2002, I mean, there was no crowdfunding. We invented that in 2002. We just didn't call it crowdfunding. We called it the supporter project. When we did that in 2002, there was no social media. There was no Facebook and there was no Instagram. Nowadays, you almost expect of an artist to Instagram their breakfast and to Instagram everything else in the day too. And back then, when we started that type of intimacy, that we are, even the word webcast didn't exist, that we were webcasting our work in the studio, made this obvious to our supporters, had an intimacy that was otherwise not existing in this business. It was only existing probably in internet pornography, but it did not exist in this context. Nowadays, if we would continue doing this, we would run into the danger of making what we're doing banal, because it is obviously everybody is doing that nowadays.
Okay.
They're not necessarily show how they work in a studio, but they even do that. Yes, they sometimes do that, and this thing is not necessary anymore, and it would be counterproductive for us. It would turn what we're doing into a rather elitarian fan circle. So we are stopping it with this round 5, the Rampen album, and we're looking for another new and revolutionary method on how to continue. And
you haven't come up with that yet? You're still looking for that? Or?
We know where we're going, but I'm not going to give that away, because I know once we're doing it, dozens of others will do it too.
All right, that's interesting. Okay. I mean, that breathed a new life into the band at the time when you did it in 2002.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we were out of a record contract. if we would have gone shopping for a new record contract at 2002, the music industry was in such a deep crisis. They would have never come up with the money, even for a band like us, for the money that we really needed to continue working. So we had to find a different solution.
Right. All right. Let me go back to the album. I remember you were talking about when you were making Lament in 2014.
Yeah.
You were focused on the fact that you were also making a stage production. So everything you were doing, you were asking yourself, how we're going to do that on stage.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so instead of putting more overdubs, you left space for the music. And that kind of translated into your last album, Alice in Alem. Did that way of thinking also make its way onto Rampen, or how was that?
No, I wouldn't. I mean, Alice in Alem was very much a let's say, normal album. We worked on different songs, and we were not. Lament was very explicitly thought of as a stage production, and it's also out of the normal order of our records. And if I say we done 5 rounds of the supporter project, Lament is outside. Lament was actually done with a record company. And we didn't have the time to work for a whole year on that, and we always knew it's going to be on stage. And foremost, it's going to be on stage. And apart from the stage, we're also releasing a record with the same material. But that does not necessarily lead into Alice in Alem. I see more of a connection between Alles wieder offen and Alice in Alem than I do see with Lament. Lament, I would really. It's a fantastic record, and it was a fantastic stage production, but it's something outside.
Right, okay. But on Alice in Alem, you were much more direct in your lyrics than before. How was it on this album, on Rampen?
No, I think they're more cryptic than ever.
You think they're more cryptic now?
That these are fragments, and these fragments span also a time that the oldest fragment is Aus den Zeiten, which I wrote in Beijing in 2004. And the youngest is Gesund, which I wrote about 2 weeks before the tour started. So they spend a long time. They are as cryptic as always. And by me reworking them in the studio and trying to make them more corporal, having more of a body, I did not necessarily meant to make them more understandable. Okay. I enjoy the fact that the cryptic writing I do enjoy. I even left if I would start with one fragment and then go to another fragment, I would leave them both and let them see what kind of a window that will open. Okay.
So on the album opener, We Long Enough, that you're saying all has been written, all has been said, everything's been sung about, that's just, you're not being direct there, or what?
This is the first improvisation that we did on tour. It was the improvisation in Bologna. And it is also the first song that we reworked for this album. So once that was done, my duty was to actually come up with some kind of coherent piece to sing. And I have to admit that I don't necessarily enjoy the. No, that's wrong. It is psychologically pretty difficult for me to get into that working mode. Once I get into that working mode, I wake up with this. I go to sleep with this, if I can sleep, and I think about it 48 hours a day. So I'm lost for my family, and I'm pretty useless for anything else too. So this is a psychological state that I don't really look forward to get into. And as at that point, when I start singing that, you can really see in the lyrics and in what I'm singing there, how much I try to not get into it. And it's all already said, it's already written, and things that cut through the charging cable and everything. I was still outside, but by the end of that song, I'm in and I'm lost, and I will be there for the next couple of months. And if this would be standing at the end of the record, it would be very disturbing. And then you would really think nothing else is coming anymore. But it stands at the beginning of the record. And as you can see, it's followed by more than an hour of more stuff.
So we long enough is just how more longer am I going to be in this state? Or
no, it is really, how long is it still going to go on?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is more. I didn't want to go there, and I ended up going there.
Right. Okay. You spent the first few weeks of the recording in a wheelchair because you slipped on some ice and you broke your thigh bone.
Yeah.
And I read you suffered with insomnia and depression as a result of your injuries.
I never used the word depression. I suffered from insomnia.
Right. And I know a lot of your inspiration comes from either through dreams or through not sleeping. So I can imagine that influenced the lyrics on the album.
Not sleeping is certainly it's gonna perforate the border between the conscious and the subconscious. Yeah.
Right.
I know that when we recorded Everything Will Be Fine, we did 6 takes of that, and then all the 6 takes, which I transcribed later, I'm singing something completely different. Apart from the melody of Everything Will Be Fine, you could hear where the rhymes are meant to sit, and you could hear single words in it, and you could hear my whole long speech in the beginning, but every time it's something completely different. And I could have done 6 takes more, and it would be still 6 completely different takes. Simply my stream of consciousness was absolutely overwhelming, so to speak.
Right.
I was in a pretty good mood in the studio. I started in a wheelchair, and then I had 2 crutches, and then I had 1 crutch by the end of the recording. But I felt at home within the womb of that recording studio with an engineer that I already know for decades, and with the band that I know for several decades. I was fine within that. I was perfectly okay, but I wasn't very movable, let's say. The wheelchair. The studio is on the 2nd floor of Flughafen Tempelhof, and I always had to carry. I had to go on crutches up, and they had to carry my wheelchair up there.
Okay. Right.
So sometimes I did not see, let's say, what Jochen was playing. I know that there's a lot of self-built instruments that he utilized for this particular album, and like giant kalimbas and something that is called the hard disk harp. And but from my position, I could not really see them, so I don't really know what they look like.
Because I see that on Mi Langenog, he plays home swinger 12-string harp. I was wondering do you know what kind of instrument that is?
No, from my position at the wheelchair next to the piano, I could not really see what Jochen was playing.
Okay, no use in asking you
but
about
we
that.
All play, we all play in the same room and in the same time, but from my position, I could not really see very clearly what it is that he's playing there. But he said here over Easter, we're going to do a whole festival in Berlin. And Jochen is doing a little workshop on self-built instruments and so on. So
I saw that.
Will be able to see that.
Yeah, you'll be able to go to that. Okay. There are quite a few songs that have a very dreamy elements to them, like Pestalozzi, As Cunt Design, Tar and Feathers, and Tripolitan. Was that just the mood you were in when the Rampen were first created, or did some of the mood change when you came into the studio?
No, you can. Most of these improvisations you will be able to find on YouTube. Yeah, if you're looking for Bologna or Paris or anything like that, I think most of them are somewhere spooking around on YouTube, and you can compare them next to each other. They are very, very similar.
Okay.
That's the way they were done on stage, and they have been faithfully reproduced.
Okay. I see you play string samples on Before I Go. I remember Alex saying about 10 years ago that you stopped using samples, but chose instead to use live strings. That's something you did go back to then?
To do an improvisation on stage and to have live strings is kind of impossible. That's what we did, and before we had, because we always have Felix Gebhardt with us, who's playing the keyboard. And the samples we have in the keyboards are usually the instruments that we cannot transport or that we cannot reproduce, like strings or Hammond organ or things like that. So piano, he plays these things on the keyboard. And since we were doing improvisations on stage, he was, of course, welcome to join us in the improvisations too. And for that particular song, Before I Go, he decided to use snippets of the strings of Sabrina. So we're not sampling somebody's stuff, we're sampling our own. So this every sample there is our own stuff. It's not somebody else's stuff. So
all right.
So there we kind of like recycle some bits of the strings from Sabrina. Okay.
The lyrics to that song seems to be like a to-do list you're crossing off when you're getting ready to leave a house or an apartment. It's very interesting because it's in its mundanity. It also paints a really strong picture. Can you tell me like the story behind that?
It was also coinciding with my life situation at the moment. You can say that every song has an anchor somewhere in my life. They are not just completely out of the blue or some thought experiment. There is always a contacting and touching point to my life there. And even so, that fragment is probably 10 years old. I was just moving once again. I was moving out of an apartment across Mauer Park and into the new apartment where I'm sitting now. And so there are. It's not realistic. It is overly appointed. It's they say. But I remember some things were exactly like that, like talking to the moving company and how to what to do with the contents of the freezer. They didn't want to take the contents of the freezer.
Okay.
So I had to just put it all in a bag and bring it over to the new freezer myself. But they didn't want to take it. They didn't want to take responsibility for food. Okay. So but you turn off the router, you turn off the router, you maybe put a message on the door saying I don't live here anymore. And you don't tell all these stupid companies that send you catalogs all the time that you not live there anymore. So they continue sending it to your old address, please.
Right.
Things like that. But it is, Before I Go, because I mean, most of the time you would think Before I Go is about death.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
You have some instruments that you've been utilizing for decades, but did you make a point to bring in new instruments to these sessions? How was that?
I didn't understand the question.
Did you bring in new instruments for these sessions? Because you have some instruments that you've been using for decades.
The only thing new is, I mean, Jochen decided once we decided to make this album, he decided he doesn't want to play guitar all the time. So he did bring a whole set of his self-made instruments.
Okay.
That's the only new colors that are there. The reason why we were able to make the record in such a short time is exactly that everything is played on the same instruments.
Okay.
The same instrument that we had on tour.
I can see in Tar and Feathers, Rudy is playing large ammunition shells. How do they work?
I didn't understand that. What?
In the song Tar and Feathers, Rudy is playing large ammunition shells, quote unquote.
No, they're left over from Lament. We bought them for Lament.
Okay.
We actually really went on eBay and somewhere and found somebody selling large ammunition shells. And then we left there, probably some kind of obscure militaria collector. And we bought the ammunition shells from him and we used them for Lament. Okay. And there we used them again.
Okay. On the song Everything Will Be Fine.
The large ammunition shells were not with us on tour. That's true. That is an instrument that was brought in later.
Okay. On the song Everything Will Be Fine, you seem to be quoting Edgar Allan Poe. Is that accurate?
That's accurate, absolutely.
Okay, right.
I quote him and I misquote him. I said, der Rabe hat sein Lied verloren. The raven lost its song. never more and never mourn. That's
Right.
not Edgar Allan Poe. And in the second round, I say never more, which is,
Right.
of course, Edgar Allan Poe. I can, for everyone listening, I can highly recommend an essay that Edgar Allan Poe has written about how he wrote this,
Okay.
which I think he deliberately wrote to disillusion everybody. Because
Right.
he said, well, I decided that at the end of each stanza, somebody has to say nevermore. How can I make that happen? If it is a human being, it sounds stupid, so it has to be an animal. Then I thought about a parrot saying nevermore, nevermore. And then he writes, yeah, but the parrot is too colorful, so I came to a raven. So the raven at the end of each stanza says nevermore. That's how he starts. He starts with, I knew exactly how many lines it should be.
Okay.
And then he writes. It's called The Method of Composition. It's an essay by Edgar Allan Poe about how he writes The Raven.
The Raven.
It is an excellent piece of writing, and it's disillusional in the sense that people believe that the first thing there is inspiration, and that you have to be going through a big emotional crisis before you're able to write something like that. No, he says, I knew exactly how long it should be, and there should be an animal saying nevermore.
Nice.
Yeah, I didn't use the Poe line, but of course, I touch it. Right. I touch it, I change it, and the rest of those lyrics, as I said, there were 6 takes of it, and I transcribed them all. But in the piece is 2 halves. In the first half, I just talk, and in the second half, the melody comes in, and you could hear in the different takes what I'm intending to do there. You could hear that there are rhymes, that there's a rhyme structure, but only very, very few lines were understandable, like the one with the raven. That was understandable. But and then I wrote the whole rest of it. I wrote on the 7th of October last year, after the main news in the evening, after the Hamas massacre in Israel. I talked to my wife, and not just because of that, but because of it's a talk that we have every now and then. As you know, life situation, war, etc., is not exactly looking very promising. Let's say everything will be fine is of course sin, but I wrote this, and it contains all the lines saying, "Where should we go now?" My wife is Chinese. My children are half Chinese. So the question I have pointing to the future is, where should we go?
Right.
Okay, that's it. That's all in there. Even so, I don't really believing in writing about something. I don't never ever write about something, but I can probably reveal the source of some thoughts. Even so, explaining what I write there would just make it smaller.
Sure. Okay. So you webcasted parts of the session for your supporters, like 14 in all. Did you take suggestions from supporters like you've done in the past?
I don't really. I mean, the relationship there is not so much different to what it was before. Okay. Before internet times. Before internet, I would easily play a rough mix to a group of friends. And if they say the drums are too loud, then I take that into consideration. And the circle is just a little bit bigger. There is the majority of our supporters is silent. And then there are some that do talk a bit and that do say something. And of course, they would also say things like the drums are too loud. Or they would also say, like, leave that line in. Don't take that line out. That's great. Leave it in. Okay? It's not that I then decide to leave it in, but it makes my point a bit stronger. I then know, okay, yeah, if I would have had any doubts, then I would certainly leave it in after that. So I don't know if you would call that suggestions, but it is good to have a larger circle and a larger set of ears and eyes at work. That we talked about Pestalozzi already, and one of the supporters found out after a while looking at the lyrics that all these products actually exist. And he made a whole long photographic thing where he just shows all these products. And he also found out, a cellar full of noises, Brian Epstein's autobiography. Yeah, it looks really great if you just see all the products in one long line. First, there's the two Pestalozzi and A.S. Neil lines, and then suddenly all these products come, and then the thing is over.
Right. Did you utilize the Dave cards while recording the album?
No, you don't need to. I mean, playing improvisations on stage is already a method that is undermining the routine. That's undermining habits. You don't need to double that with an aleatoric topping. You don't need to be double aleatoric. If we start an improvisation on stage, I don't know what everyone else will be doing.
Right.
So I don't need another set of cards to undermine what I don't know anyway.
Right. Okay. You guys record the songs live and then you might do overdubs. Have you always worked like that, or?
Yeah, you always work like that. There are not that many overdubs on the record. There are some of these songs are just really like Everything Will Be Fine. That is just the only overdub is my vocal.
Okay. How was the sequence of the album determined?
In opposite to what I would have still done like about 10 years ago when the industry was still focused on CDs, you would always half-heartedly, you would make the CD, you would make the sequence for the CD, and then you would cut up the whole thing and put it on different sides of an album for vinyl. That was not the case here. In this case, we were really already thinking vinyl. We were not thinking about the CD at all. We were thinking vinyl. And once it was clear that this is not going to be a single album, but this is going to be a double album, I was trying to orientate on the classical high times of the double album, which is like psychedelic and krautrock, Not to forget the Beatles' White Album either. But focusing on that, then you would automatically have 4 sequences for different sides of a vinyl. And you would start the sequence with a good opener. You would run the whole album, and there are only particular songs that are suitable for the end of the vinyl. There are songs like, in this case, Everything Will Be Fine and Gesundbrunnen, where I would feel they don't belong in the middle of a sequence. They belong to the end of a side. They're a typical end of side record. Right. And apart from that, as a reference to these classical albums, I thought there should be one side that is just one long stream running through. Like Can's B-side on Future Days, or there's one long stream. There's the 3 sides that have songs, and there are always the end songs and the start songs, and there is the side which one long stream, which you keep in your mind and your memory, and then you say, let's listen to side 3 of that album, and that is the Pit of Language, Planet Umbra, Tar and Feathers. They go very well together in one flow. That was my plan in the studio. I of course look also at not running in the same key in a sequence, running C sharp, C sharp, C sharp, or anything like that. We spent 2 days in figuring out the sequence for that, and I'm very, very happy with the sequence because you can really listen to the whole thing in one side, one, two, one leads to the next one. It's really in that sense, it's classical rock music sequencing.
Sure.
I'm cool. There's so many. My usual musical socialization. I'm 65 years old. Is really the classical canon of rock music. Really means the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Doors, Velvet Underground. The whole bag. and of course the German krautrock of the time. And in that in particular, not the Berlin school, but Düsseldorf Cologne. Neu, Can, Kraftwerk. That's the stuff that I grew up with. And I have to say, I saw Can 3 times live. Twice with Damo Suzuki and once without him.
Okay.
And when Can were great, they were improvising on stage was divine. And this is something that I hope Neubauten is doing as well. When we improvise and we improvise good on stage, there is a telepathic combination between the people, and they are and we can do things because very often when we play these improvisations, they are somewhere in the middle of the set or there is an encore. People are just out there saying, I don't know this song, but they don't realize that we're actually improvising.
Right. You talked about Velvet Underground. Was Metal Machine Music, the Lou Reed album, was that not in any way an influence? Or
No, yeah, an influence.
did you listen to that back in the day?
I heard it. It's a classic to me, and you know that Lou Reed's intention when he did that, he wanted this to be released on the classical output of that record label. He wanted this to be taken as a serious piece of contemporary classical composing. Yeah. Which, of course, a record company didn't do. They put a photo of him on the front and called metal machine music on it. I heard it. I heard it back then when it came out, and but to me, the Velvet Underground, like especially the third album, the one where they sit on the couch, you know. Right, the self-titled one. Okay, was that a big one for you? That was the first one that I heard, right. And that was certainly important to me. How old are you? Do you think when you heard that album for the first time? I must have been about 16, as it was given to me by a school friend who had it from his older sister. He gave it to me, he lent it to me, I never gave it back. I still have it. And it's so completely scratched that I was never able to listen to the first song. I never heard Candy Says till decades later. No way. Because you couldn't play it. Damn. Okay. I was exactly the same age when I got that album for the first time. I still remember the feeling of listening to it. That is, I mean, I like the other Velvet Underground albums too, but that was the biggest impact, and also the first one that I heard. Okay. You talked about how West Berlin was this strange little creative island, but it was also kind of your yardstick for normality. And before you started to travel, it didn't occur to you just how unique Berlin was. Yes, how was it actually growing up there? Yeah, I think wherever you grow up, you will take where you grow up for being the normal. Yeah, so to me, I was never so aware of the island status as somebody growing up there. It seemed normal to me, but for a very, very long time, and then after the founding of the band, I always thought what we are doing is kind of could be existing in other urban landscapes, in other urban surroundings, and only with my horizon getting bigger by playing in the US, New York, or London, or wherever in Europe, or even in Reykjavik. I realized that is simply not true, that West Berlin is a pretty unique place, and that's something that the way we are doing things and what we are doing is not that easily could have come from another place. Right. I mean, in the very beginning, when the first live shows, Andrew always incorporated fire as well. Yeah, we had a lot of things. that didn't have anything to do with A, Rammstein, or B, danger in that sense. It was pretty inhabited, and but we were not aware how much of a provocation and how much of a threat this was when we were playing the first shows in the US. You know, in the US, this went completely bizarre. Like as bizarre as that, we only played support act 3 times in our career. Once in Pasadena for an act called The Specimen that you probably don't remember. You don't have to remember. Okay, there was an act called Specimen, and we were the support act, but we lit the stage on fire. The support act had no chance whatsoever. It was, and the next day we were playing the Mojave Desert.
All right.
Yeah, and then we played. We had fire in a really big disco. How was it called? The Palladium. Yeah, the Palladium in New York City. And yeah, well, we had this big metal bowl, and then we put petrol in it, and we light it up. But we continue playing everything. And I mean, it's well contained. Nothing is happening. But they went completely berserk, and they went so berserk they lowered the Iron Curtain. And I was going down on my knees so that I could still sing. And the people grabbed my arms and tried to draw me off stage. While the Iron Curtain is coming down, very close to decapitating me.
Wow.
And then they stopped the Iron Curtain. With me half hanging on stage and off stage. People draw me back on stage, and then they went all completely wild. They throw me down the stairs, and they wanted to beat us all up. And I mean, in Pasadena, they put a gun on my head, literally. But there they throw several people down the stairs. One of them later became our manager in the US because they broke her leg, and she was in a wheelchair, and she sued them, and she got money, and later became our manager in the US. Miss Kathy Nizari. But that was an answer to, like, you know, how much was West Berlin? You know, nobody fucking West Berlin cared if you put fire on stage or not.
Okay, right.
So what? But in America, that was an enormous threat.
Right. Wasn't there a point where, like, the club owners were greeting you with fire extinguishers and promoters were forced to just turn down opportunities?
That's exactly what happened after, let's say, these 2 gigs. They were placing people with fire extinguishers on the left and the right side of the stage. And when this whole thing became a show effect, we immediately dropped it. I mean, this is for us it was playing, but for them it was show. So we dropped it. I think we had 1 or 2 gigs where we came out with canisters, but the canisters were filled with water. And we came out with canisters and we poured them out on stage like dramatic, hold up a lighter. And it's just, it became a joke.
Okay. Because I read that just playing, when you played the first time when you played outside of Berlin, it was kind of downright dangerous because the crowds outside of Berlin were so hostile.
Yeah, that is indeed true, and that is indeed still true. That I have to say that our least favorable gigs on these tours are the ones in if you exclude Munich and Hamburg, all the other cities in Munich and Hamburg are Berlin, Munich, Hamburg, and Munich are the 3 biggest cities in Germany. So everything out of that, like Stuttgart or Wiesbaden or whatever, we are still confronted with this soccer mentality. For them, we are not a band or a great band or whatever. We are the Berliners.
Oh, really?
And then we always told it was like the reviews as well as the audience. Of course, I can't talk about the audience because the audience is a large collection of individuals. There are great people in there, otherwise they wouldn't come to our show. But there are also always these idiots among, and then the idiots manifest themselves by this kind of chauvinistic, in a true sense of the word, with a chauvinistic soccer mentality.
Okay.
And the reviews for these shows are usually like that too. And then, a newspaper in Cologne will go, it always will be soaked in some kind of disgust and okay, it's a nice show, but, and then the Berliner say, so
Okay.
we have already reduced the amount of shows that we play in other German cities simply by we're bored with that attitude. If I have to describe myself as something, I am first of all a European, and second, I'm from Berlin, but I would never use the term German.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. What about the
And
European?
it is also, I mean, if you're talking about German and German music and etc., I find it disgusting and unjustified that the most successful German band is delivering this super stereotypical Germanness to other countries. Something that we never did. And we will never do, but I don't need to call their name, but you know what I'm talking about. It's absolutely disgusting. My God, it is like, when the German actors that did flee from Germany to Hollywood, and they were always asked to play Nazis, and they really didn't like playing Nazis, the Jewish actors that ran away from Germany, ending up, and they never wanted to play Nazis, but they always ended up having to play the German, the Nazi, the whatever. And that's how it feels to me. There's a band that delivers a stereotype.
Right. Definitely. But like when you started Neubauten and singing in German in 1980, you're one of the very few who did that. And then looking 20 years later back, the lion's share of popular music in Germany was singing in German, and artists were going even platinum, singing in the mother language. What do you attribute that aesthetic change to?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, time, certainly. It is really true that back then, like the times when Neubauten started, the general consensus was still that you cannot sing rock music in German. There was also, the grow of the German Krautrock found their ways around it. They were either instrumental, like Ashra Temple, Tangerine Dream, or Klaus Schulze or whatever, or they had foreign singers like Ken, that either did speak English or not, like Damo Suzuki, who just even found a way around language altogether, which was great. And the only band that really big time did was Tonsteine Scherben. Tonsteine Scherben was, in that sense, a rock band, in the sense of same background. Beatles, Rolling Stones, MC5 in a big way. They even supported MC5 on a concert, and they sang consequently in German. But the grow consensus was still, you can't do that. And then a thing happened was called Neue Deutsche Welle, which was the revival of Schlock music with nonsense and bastardized lyrics, and very few exceptions, of course. There are some. And then Kraftwerk started singing. If I have not learned anything about singing, it's certainly from Kraftwerk. Yeah. I learned something from Damo Suzuki. I didn't learn much from Kraftwerk. The singing is awful. Okay. But then they all suddenly sing in German. I mean, Kraftwerk did this thing. The strange thing that Kraftwerk did is they released the English versions and the German version.
Sure.
And like the Radioactivity album, they even made it they sang first one verse in German, then they sang the same verse in English, and the same in German. And they very cleverly got through this. And we're talking, when did Radioactivity come out? Radioactivity is after Autobahn.
Right.
Autobahn was a complete surprise hit. It was not getting anywhere in Germany. It became a hit in the US.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It didn't go anywhere in Germany. Then
Really?
it became recognized in the US, and then it swapped back into Europe, into Germany. It wasn't
okay.
that record. I bought the record when it came out because I was always a huge Kraftwerk fan, but it didn't go anywhere in Germany. No.
Interesting. Okay. So in 1 week, there's gonna be what? How many years? 44 years since you played in the Moon Club. That was very random. That was very random. You were asked if you want to perform, and you just accepted, called a few friends, and the initial members of the band were the people who happened to be, have a free evening that evening. Is that right?
That is correct, more or less, yeah.
Right. And you just chose the name. Where did the name come from?
I had when I was still going to school, we had somebody in our class called Connie Malenke, who, for some amusement of the others, every now and then in the silence, he would utter that word, Einstürzende Neubauten. And everybody laughed. And it was, and from there, it became kind of it lurked somewhere in my background.
Okay. But
and when somebody asked, what should I call it? I said, Einstürzende Neubauten. So
and it just
I didn't think that I would still do this 44 years later.
No, right.
I didn't even think I would do it a month later. But it became manifest and obviously and cemented when we signed the first record contract with Some Bizarre in the mid-'80s. We signed a record contract by a lawyer called Kennedy in London, and we were fucked. But from there, it was obvious, now we are a band. We have to deliver 3 more records or 4, actually. 4 more records, and we will continue.
Right.
I remember, in the same week, in the evening at the nightclub called The Jungle, I met Gudrun, and she said, so, what, are you continue doing this? And then I realized, obviously it looks like I'm continue doing this because I just signed a record contract.
You met her in the 80s, right? Okay.
Well, I met Gudrun in the 70s.
No, but I mean you met her again, right? In the 80s,
I met her all the time, but I remember her saying that to me when I signed the record contract, that she always thought that this thing is just a temporary Blitz idea, and that it will disappear, and that of course once you sign a record contract, you cement that, you put it on the floor, and
right. But you've been documenting. I mean, the first gig you can get it live in Kunststoff stereo. Like you recorded all of these first gigs, so you really documented the band from the get-go. So it's really interesting to hear how it progresses.
I was in the habit of recording everything. Yeah. There was the times of these, small Sony recordable Walkmans that you can set up anywhere and press the button and record. Yeah, and that's how I still have them. I have them all digitalized, and they're still there. Yeah, the one in Kunststoff Stereo is actually recorded on a reel-to-reel machine.
Okay.
My brother.
Okay. So
the Kunstkopf that is a first generation Kunstkopf. That was owned by the same guy that gave me the Velvet Underground record.
All right, nice.
And the reel-to-reel tape was my brother's.
Okay. When you did Collapse, you got 5,000 German marks as a budget, but there was no engineer, so you had to record it and mix it, and you had to learn all those things like to splice tape and what have you.
Yeah.
That must have been a big asset when you recorded your albums later, because you kind of did you end up producing most of your albums yourselves, or how was that?
Yeah, it became. We were just basically told where the microphones should be plugged in, and that these are the EQs, and that's where you press record. And we literally then, we pressed record, ran into the recording room, played the stuff, ran out of it, and pressed stop. Yeah,
right.
And of course, this and the following years that weren't that much different. we learned enough to at least not getting a stupid radio engineer telling us how to do things.
Right.
Yeah, I remember the two John Peel sessions that I did. I did a John Peel session with Einstürzende Neubauten.
Right.
And about 2 weeks later, I did a John Peel session with the bad seats.
Okay.
And then in the first John Peel session, I set up my stuff and etc. And the engineer tells me, okay, you should not put the amp here, you should put the amp there, and you should do it like this and that, and so on. And okay, we recorded the shit. 2 weeks later, I go there with the bad seats, and they don't even realize that I'm the same person.
Mm.
And they tell me exactly the same shit. Yeah. And I realized, okay, these engineers, they just want to have an easy time, never to rethink anything or to do anything different, because they've done it like for years and years and years in this very, very same way, and they don't want to change that.
Right.
And that is an attitude that a lot of engineers have, especially if you work with like radio stations or things like that, and they always tell you. And I was already at a point nobody could tell me things like that anymore, because I fucking recorded my own records and I know how to do it and I know what is possible and what is not possible.
Right. That John Peel session, that ended Sehnsucht of the Halbermans album.
Yeah.
That was recorded on that Peel session.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Yes, we later bought the John Peel session because we wanted to use that song. Yeah.
Right.
Because usually if you do a John Peel session, you later can, either the BBC can continue using it or you buy it of them. And we bought it of them.
Okay. When you did the Zeichnungen des Patient OT, or the drawings of the patient OT, you had John Caffrey with you. Did that take some of the pressure off you guys? Like just to focus on making the music? Or
John Caffrey, we met in London. He's originally from Manchester. He is also the recording engineer for the last Joy Division record.
Right.
Yeah, Closer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was there in that circle.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, well, we never had an engineer before, as we just talked about. We never had an engineer before, and then of course John did know some things that we did not know. He did some things different, and he recorded in a different way, and he had the patience to work with us, and he was interested enough in doing it. That was fine. He was then lent away from us. The question came from Die Toten Hosen.
Mm-hmm.
You know Die Toten Hosen?
Yeah.
And the Toten Hosen wanted to needed an engineer because they wanted to do a rap piece.
Yeah.
And then we lent them John Caffrey, and he was then, after that, he was their engineer for decades.
Right.
And in a recent TV documentary about the Toten Hosen, they also question him, Neubauten, Toten Hosen, tralala. And John Caffrey says, in his whole life and career, he's never worked with any band being so untalented as the Toten Hosen.
Okay.
They have no talent whatsoever. Maybe Campino can sing, but musically speaking, they are the most untalented band I ever worked with.
Damn.
After that, we worked with Gareth Jones,
right,
who we got through Fat Gadget. We were playing a Berlin show and Fat Gadget.
Right.
And he liked us, we liked him, and but he wrote the song "Collapsing New People," which was obviously a riff on us. The Collapsing New People. That's Neubauten, and he invited us to the studio to play on that song. So we did, and that was produced by Gareth. And then Gareth produced in the same studio. Hansa, we're talking, produced Depeche Mode. That's when their, so let's say, metal phase starts with people up people and so on and so on.
Right.
I don't know what samples were used or where they come from. Gareth told me once he used the material from Fat Gadgets that we have recorded, but since then everybody is denying it. And
Okay.
it doesn't really matter to me. It is just through this connection, Fat Gadget. After that, Gareth asked us if we would like to make a record with him. And
Okay.
we made it, and then we recorded at Hansa Studio with Gareth Jones in a once again different recording technique. This was before sampling was invented. The name sampling didn't exist. There was very expensive machines called EMS in the studio. In the more expensive studios, they had one of those, and it had a little flick button called lock in. There you could, lock in a sound. And that sound you could play back by pushing a button. So you put clonk in there, you push the button, it gets clonk, clonk, clonk. That's how they did People Are People and other songs and things. And we started experimenting with that, composing a piece like Lygung, has a clear riff on a metal spring and a metal sheet. And we locked all these things in.
Mm-hmm.
And just played the same thing really precisely by a button. A method actually that you remember Public Image Limited Flowers of Romance?
Sure.
That whole album is done like that.
Okay.
They didn't know what to do in the studio. They only had toy instruments and things like that. And they played with that function. Lock in, and so on, playing what you can't play, and etc. That was a thing that was done in the same method. So like Depeche Mode back then, and with only electronical sounds, etc. And we started working like that. This is pre-sampling time, but where sampling actually comes from. Later, you have Archive, etc., and they have samplers. But this EMS, you could already also play. You could program, like say, a rhythm machine, and you program the rhythm in it, and it would play the EMS and would actually play the sound precisely in the rhythm.
Right.
That was new to all of us, and was also especially new. I thought first it was very lifeless because it was so precise.
Yeah.
But then once I started singing on it, it seemed to work. And then we did these things like Lygung or the big time Halber Mensch album. That not everything was done in that way. There are lots of things that are just classically played in a room, like Seele or something. But that was a new chapter. From there on, we did a couple of records at Hansa Studio, or Hansa Studio in combination with other studios.
Right. Yeah, I read, according to Mark, you didn't want to sing to a machine because it was too regular, and Gareth kind of had to take you for a walk and convince you to try it out, right?
Yeah, that's true.
But it's interesting to hear the jump from Collapse to Patient OT, because there you have the stereo spectrums and are doing all of these things, and then to Halbermans, like huge, huge leaps.
The first thing we did was a double single. In the double single, there was still a normal drum set, which FM Einheit would play, and a drum set that looked like a drum set in different pieces and around bass drum kind of thing. That end would be built out of things he's stolen from building sites.
Right.
And the step that happened between this double single and the next album, Collapse, was that this set of drum set dissolved.
Right.
It became, in the history of drum set, it is like jazz, silent movie, people accompanying silent movie. It was also called a set of traps. It was all, you put all kinds of things together that you could play. There's a cowbell, there's a thing that was rich, and there's probably a honking horn from a car. This is a set of traps. And that is when the idea of the set is born.
Okay.
Then there are some drummers that started using their feet, having bass drum, and then somebody invented the hi-hat, and so on. That dissolved in Collapse. In Collapse, it dissolved, and it became pieces again. It became all kinds of percussion pieces. And the step from there was really the working title for the drawings of OT was hunters and collectors.
Sure.
We were really hunting things and collecting sounds, and we were trying to expand this as much as possible, putting all kinds of material to our use, and anything from organic materials to air, water, heat,
Right.
plastic. We used everything there, and after that, there was not much more to expand because we really had tried it all. Every now and then we looked at particular aspects of things that we have explored on that, because drawings of OT took a very, very long time to make. Or we went from one studio to another one. Every time we had no more credit, basically, we went to the next studio.
Okay.
And in that time, it became also necessary for us to sign to a record company because we couldn't finance it. We didn't have anything. We went to a studio in Berlin, game studio, really literally in a street where the other side was the wall. And we did things like throwing microphones on cables over the wall and recording the other side. We couldn't finance it any longer. And from there, we always just looked at particular aspects. The first album really where things more or less became songs was really then Halber Mensch.
Right.
I wrote that choir piece, and there were many other. And there's also the first live Rampe that we produced in the studio, which is Letztes Biest am Himmel, which is also on Halber Mensch. That is, as much as I know, the first Rampe that we ever re-recorded.
Right. Were you making a point of giving the audience a little room to breathe towards the end of the album? Because that's kind of the most subdued track on Halber Mensch.
I don't know. This is too long ago to say what my thoughts were. I just thought it was a good piece of music, and good, completely out of the blue lyrics that I didn't have written anywhere before. So I thought it was worth recording.
Sure.
It was very, very late in the morning when we actually finished this one. It was only Gareth and me left when I actually sang this piece. And I know there was a building site outside the studio. And because it was already late in the morning, like say 8 o'clock or something, they had already started it. So for the beginning of the track, I actually opened the window just to let the sound of the building site in. You hear that when you hear the first bars of it, you hear the sudden. Then I close the window again and start singing.
Okay.
I remember that.
Right.
And from there on, then if you go to the next album, like 5 on the open-ended Richter scale, my wish was then to proceed from what we have done on Halber Mensch to a more organic way of recording, because we were still in Hansa's studio in a really big room. I wanted us to all the subtitle for that was a recording title after Halber Mensch, which had no working title, was all together in one room. So that's what we did there again. We instead of this falling apart into pressing buttons, I wanted us to all record together in one room again. And then we got these things like Zerstörte Zelle and 12 Städte. No, this is all done in a very old-fashioned band recording technique.
Right. You can hear on that album Morning Dew, that's kind of our first image of Blixa, the baritone crooner, which you involved into.
Maybe.
Can hear your voice. You can hear your voice changing.
That was a strange thing. We played the Vancouver World Expo in Canada, in Vancouver.
Right.
Wonderful program. It was the Indian dancers of the Northern Territories, Einstürzende Neubauten, and Nussundur and La Toile de Dakar.
Okay.
What a wonderful program.
Right.
And after that show, the organizer, Myra Davies, gave me a fossil, a trilobite.
Okay.
And she gave me the trilobite with the words, "This is before there were different genders and different sexes."
Right.
this is lurks in the back of my head and somewhere comes back in this fragment, trilobites. Ich, du, ich, du, ich, du, ich, du, noch ungeteilt. You, me, still not divided.
Right.
That plays a role there, even so that fragment that I've written there is not that old. But back then in Vancouver, when we played that, they gave us, the Goethe Institute gave us a money that we have to use in an artistic way right away. So we rented a studio in Vancouver and recorded Morning Dew.
Okay, all right.
With some people from Skinny Puppy present, and our roadies at the show were all Skinny Puppy.
Okay, okay.
Good friends back then.
When did you start having structure on your lyrics? Because in the beginning you just made it up.
Really, when I started writing them, and that is that starts really somewhere around 5 on the open-ended Richter scale.
Okay.
That's really when there are notes and snippets and all kinds of things on records before, because after Collapse is really not written. And then after Collapse, then I started making notes already. But the structure creeps in later. If I learned anything from working with the Bad Seeds, it is this other tradition. You know, I come from a rather German krautrock background, where songs are not really the normal way of dealing with things. But in Mick Harvey's lingo, it would be, he would call them pieces. Now they're musical pieces. Maybe somebody is singing, but they're not songs. And if I learned anything from working with the Bad Seed, was to understand their song background, the Anglo-American song background, the idea of, okay, this is a verse, is a chorus, this is a low verse and a double chorus, middle eight, all these things that I had nothing to do with in my musical upbringing. I didn't know anything about this thing, but there I did understand at least the basics of that. And that probably also had an influence on structuring the lyrics, because I mean, I can't unlearn something. I've learned something, and so here they are. I can't really pin down where I first really did things like that. But then, of course, you started with Morning Dew. It's a cover version, so there is a cover version on Halber Mensch, which is also done by Lee Hazelwood. I mean, Morning Dew is not originally Lee Hazelwood, but there is a Lee Hazelwood version of it too. So I was listening to Lee a lot back then, and I did learn a bit there as well. How are things structured? How are things written? And I don't know exactly where that manifests itself. And of course, there was always also the anti-Blixa, the one that did understand that, but only to break the rules. To write like that, but also break the rule. I have a motto in the creation in general, which is that you make up a rule, you follow the rule, and then you break the rule. But it is very important that you, first of all, you make up. When we did things like die Befindlichkeit des Landes, we're developing one part after another, etc. And then Alex makes up a rule. He says, no 16ths.
Okay.
No 16ths. It's sometimes very easy. You play, and then you want to put something extra on top of it, and you go to the 16ths, you know, whatever. Yeah. The rule is no 16ths. So, and then you probably follow that rule, and at some point you will find, now we break the rule. Yeah. And I don't think we break it in Befindlichkeit ever, but it is to enforce creativity, to speed up creativity. It is the opposite of limiting if you come up with your own laws.
Right. Okay. Cool. Yeah. I mean, like with the Bad Seeds, your part in the creative process that was much more pronounced in the beginning of the band. Yeah. Like there were a lot of Neubauten influences on these first Nick Cave albums.
the band wasn't as fixed as it was in the end. Like the last album that I played on was Nocturama, and I was bored. It was not really. If I remember the times that we were doing From Her to Eternity, my first day in the recording studio was a Bad Seeds. I came with Nick to the recording studio in the morning. He played one chord on the piano. I made a guitar installation at the amp with a little thing that would cut off the signal and put it back on, which you can hear all the way through Saint Huck.
Right.
And then Edison comes and he didn't know what to do with that. And I suggest, why don't you just play a note and an octave?
Right.
And then Mick Harvey comes, no drum set is there, so he plays only on the cardboard boxes of a drum set. Sounds fantastic. And this is where, also when Mick Harvey came, he also said that that's where it comes from. He said, this is not a song, it's a piece.
Right.
But it develops into something. And there was a lot of experimentation and not really clearly fixed roles and everything. But by the end, when we were doing Nocturama, I got given 8 different chord charts for 8 different songs, and we all record them in one day.
Yeah.
I sit there and I go E sharp, B, C, E sharp, B, C. Now the chorus D, 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 and it was. For me, it was not really interesting anymore. I did not split from the Bad Seeds because of musical differences. I did split from the Bad Seeds because I knew that I won't be able to do a marriage, because I was recently married, a marriage and 2 bands.
Right.
That would end. I didn't want to be ripped off by the management any longer.
Sure. So
I split, and once I split, they actually looked into the management and found all the bags of money hidden in the ceiling and the secret real estate and all the other shit that he's taken off us.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, I did not know that.
Yeah, now time is over. The guy's dead. So.
All right.
He was originally the manager of Syd Barrett. He was that long in business.
Right. When you were playing, you usually played the Fender Mustang or the Jaguar, right?
Correct, yeah.
Did these just stick with you by chance, or did you go through a lot of types?
I went through a lot of guitars, and in the beginning of the Bad Seeds, I still played my old Hofner guitar, which I had since my 16th birthday.
Right.
It was given to me by my father on the 16th birthday. It was a fantastic guitar.
Right.
But it fell apart at a show in Detroit, and then I always had to borrow guitars from the support acts, and in the end I bought a new guitar in New York, a 1967 baby blue Fender Mustang.
Okay.
Still have it. I probably should get it looked at, but it is still existing. And later in Japan, I also bought a Fender Jaguar. Also still have a guitar.
Okay, right. Nick said that you often showed up on tour without a guitar and then just borrowed the equipment.
Yeah, I showed up on tour once and forgot to bring my guitar.
But he said that no matter what you were playing, you somehow managed to come up with a soundscape that no one else could possibly duplicate.
Yeah, sure. First of all, I'm left-handed, but I play right-handed guitar. So
right.
My leading hand is still my left hand, so I could do things with the left hand and the bottleneck, etc., that you wouldn't normally do. Like I would damp strings on one side, and I would play slide on the other, and then change the strings that are damp with my right hand, which is kind of the opposite of what you would normally do, where your right hand is the leading hand.
Right. So that's one of the reasons why your guitar playing is so distinctive. You always played like that. You never tried playing left-handed. You always just played the...
No, I did much later. I tried, why am I actually playing this way? And I tried to change that, but that was probably much too late already.
Right.
It was already all in my body. It didn't go away anymore.
Right. Nick also said that alongside your distinctive guitar playing, you were able to make like difficult decisions in the studio that he found kind of enviable, because he said he was often indecisive, and you brought that quote-unquote brutality of thinking.
there were songs in which Nick was struggling to find what to do or how to approach it, and then I would probably do something that gave him a completely new picture. Yeah,
Right.
that's true.
Right.
Yeah, like Brompton Oratory or other pieces like that. When I first came to town, yeah, I know what.
He's been.
Nick just saw me playing in the same studio that we recorded the drawings of Patient OT. That's the times that Nick and the birthday party was living in Berlin. And I took him to the studio one morning. I had a cue. I took him to the studio one morning after we were going through the night. I took him to the studio and I played guitar. And I know that must have impressed him so much that he always, that where his thought formed, and said, you should have me as a guitarist for a future band, because I was so immensely loud. So immensely loud and so discrepant and dissonant, and that he just thought, oh, wow, yeah, I need that man for playing guitar. He could have asked me if I want to play clarinet in his band. I don't care. I never looked at myself as a guitarist. I have, in the same time as I, of course, have a particular likeness and love for the instrument, in the same time I hate it. Yeah.
Right.
There's a comic strip that some German artist made about Nick and the birthday party and the bad seeds. And in that one, I'm always depicted as standing on stage with my legs apart, a really big testosterone fueled position.
Right.
I would, in fact, never do on stage. I really liked it when the New York Times wrote that I play guitar like I'm waiting for the bus.
Right. I mean, there's a really lovely interview with you and Nick on a German TV show in the late 90s, where he described you as godlike, that you were his tower of strength. He was saying, I'm neurotic and confused and paranoid, and Blixa Bargeld is a tower of strength. Like, he really seems to. There are numerous interviews where he thinks you're amongst the most inspiring people he's ever worked with. Like, you obviously inspired him a lot in his creative work.
Very well.
Yeah. But you didn't play. I mean, you played guitar on Grasserdam.
Yeah, that's one of the last. Yeah, that's probably the last people. No, I played guitar on Grasserdam. That's true.
You hadn't played guitar for a long time on a Neubauten album, or how was that?
Yeah, no. First of all, we have a guitarist, and then I have not really communicated with that instrument since I left the bad seeds. I have not.
Okay.
In their case, and they are sleeping.
Okay, right. Okay.
But the guitar that I play on, there's another guitar actually. I just bought it on a whim, another Fender, and then I played that one there. I didn't want to look at the old ones. Okay.
You can kind of hear the sound though on that track, a little bit reminding of that Blixa guitar sound. So.
Yeah, it's the bell light, the chimes, and yeah.
You said it helped you out being in the bad seats for all these years, because with Neubauten, it helped you out having these two projects, kind of, they balanced each other out.
Yeah, they didn't really balance each other out. Like Nick was working much more in a traditional way of output. In the 20 years I was with him, I don't know how many records we did. We probably did a record every year.
Right.
We did a tour every year. Neubauten's output was much smaller, like something every 2 or 2.5 years. And sometimes I had to say, when they asked, we are going to play Lollapalooza this year, I had to say, sorry, I can't do it. I have other things to do.
Right.
It happened every now and then that they had to take a replacement guitarist on tour because I couldn't do it.
Right. There have been
in the end, I decided, okay, I better let the bad seeds continue without me because I have other things to do.
There have been a few times that you were thinking about breaking up Neubauten, like when you were doing Entenoi, for example. Wasn't there a place when?
No, I did not. No, that thought was very short. I was sitting in Bangkok in a restaurant when I got the call that FM Einheit has left the band.
Okay.
Then I thought for the rest of the dinner, should I continue or should I not continue? But also here, there was also a very practical decision. We already had recorded 3 pieces. Yeah, and we have
Right.
started a couple of others, and
Right.
that cost money. There's
Right.
studio money, etc. And I decided, no, I will finish off that record with whoever. I will finish the
Right.
record, and I finished it with Alex and Andrew. Yeah,
Right.
and that was kind of came full circle, because before we were working with Mark and Frank Martin Einheit, we were a trio. It was Alex, Andrew, and me.
Right.
Our first gig in Hamburg was Alex, Andrew, and me. And
Right.
we recorded only one song in that particular way, but before the others came, it was Alex, Andrew, and me. And then
Right.
so after they left, it was just Alex, Andrew, and me again. So
Right.
that was not so different. And then we looked for some other people to join to go on tour with us. First, the registration was Kaspar Brötzmann. But then Alex decided, okay, Alex decided I switched to bass. Then the session with Kaspar Brötzmann, that did not work out. And then Jochen and Rudi joined. And then we had a lineup, and that lineup is more stable and more productive than anything that I've done with the band before. Because I mean, we're working now for 25 years.
Right.
And I have more time since I'm not working with the Bad Seeds. We've done Silence is Sexy, we've done Perpetuum Mobile, Grundstück, Alles wieder offen, Alles in allem, Lament, and in between we did a couple of little movies. We did 8 experimental records.
The Musterhaus albums, yeah, right.
Yeah. So
sure.
The output is much better
Definitely.
than what we did before. Yeah.
Definitely. So I see we're coming up on our time. So you're going out on the road all over Europe next fall through September and October.
Yeah.
I can see you sold out in Hamburg and Stockholm and Antwerp, and you added a date in Hanover and a second Antwerp date.
I am not really informed about that. I'm not following that, but
I'm telling you.
possible.
So
I think they're trying to add another gig to Copenhagen too, because it's also sold out. And
awesome. I'm coming out. I'm gonna take my fiance to see you guys.
Super.
You haven't been.
I'm also working with I just had premiere with a Malmö theater group, a play called Flammenwerfer.
Okay.
For which I wrote the music, which is good. Very nice. It's going to be later this year, I think in August, in Aarhus in Copenhagen.
Nice.
And after the Neubauten tour, I'm going to be on tour with Teho again.
Oh, really? Are you guys working on a new album?
Yeah. We have started working on it before the pandemic.
Oh,
and
that's great.
I am also working with my Swiss. I have also a Swiss band called Kiku, Kiku.
Right.
And I just recorded 4 new songs for them, with them. And one of them is so fantastic that I asked them to look into the possibility of going into the European Song Contest next year.
Okay.
For Switzerland, of course.
For Switzerland, sure.
Not for Germany, for Switzerland.
Yeah.
I want to be there when they say Germany, 0 points.
Okay. Are you working on your autobiography, or how is that?
I worked on it quite a bit when in the height of the pandemic, when I was isolated myself with the family in Portugal. I worked quite a bit on it, so I'm a couple of steps further, but I'm still not finished.
Okay. All right.
So thank you for this long and extensive interview.
No, thank you, Blixa. I'll definitely catch you back later down the way, because we have a lot to talk about. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your work. Blixa Bargeld, everybody.